All right, welcome everyone, and very glad that you could join us today. My name is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and question moderator for today's webinar, Material Challenges, ACPL's Journey to Training Staff. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will get them during the webinar. Also, today's presenters are Matthew Etzel, Collection Services Manager, and Tonya Frandle, Public Services Manager at the Allen County Public Library. After this webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's Archive Webinars page. If you're watching an archived recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check out our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. So let's get started, and I'll start with a reminder in the chat. If you could change it from hosts and panelists to everyone, just so everybody can see your questions if you want to do that. So now at this point, I will hand the presentation over to Matthew and Tonya.
Thanks, Paula. So glad to be with you all today and this morning to talk about this. So kind of a little background here. We realized that in all the trainings for material challenges, and there's a lot of stuff out there, what wasn't out there was like, how do we get our staff really well prepared for this kind of thing? And so there's a lot involved there. So we kind of created our own for that. And so today we're going to talk through, this is kind of a higher level, talk through the process. How did we do this? Who was involved? How did it happen? And that sort of thing. But then, of course, we will go through the overview of the topics that we covered, how the staff responded to that, sort of that, and then some tips on implementing at your library as we go. We typically do this in person. This is the first virtual session, so we try to make it as organic as possible. And please ask your questions as you can. We'll watch the chat for that, because that helps spark conversation back and forth. So, but we will try to pause for questions periodically throughout. So, all right. So next slide here, Tonya. Going. So we started. There was a direction from our administration that we definitely needed to train staff. Obviously, material challenges are in a kind of a new and different place, which we'll talk about in a minute. In society today, and this is a hot topic, and it was. So last year, there was a clear, well, longer than that, there was a clear direction that we needed to do this and we needed to implement this training. So a core group was established to kind of come up with the topics and the how we wanted to do it. And then Tonya and I were the ones to actually roll out that training, but there was a larger group involved in initially planning it out. Then we had a training outline and timeline approved, of course, through that. So we rolled it out to the branch and the department managers first. So we got the managers in one of their routine meetings. We did the training with them first. So they kind of saw it coming, had it going there as the first step. And then we scheduled meetings, in-person meetings with all the locations. So 13 branches, 7 departments during staff meetings. For that. So that's how physically we were in person with each branch or department with their people. So with them. So, and then we wanted this to be an ongoing thing, not like a one and done. Here you go, here's your info, and that's it. We wanted this to be an ongoing training. So we do have further trainings planning, probably in the form of role play, coming maybe this fall. We'll have to see, schedule permitting for that. So,
yeah. And we also hope to record our training for new staff to be able to attend on an ongoing basis.
Yep.
And I see somebody has their hand raised. Angela.
Okay.
No, okay.
Yeah, questions in the chat, please. That'll we'll get them. Oh, no worries. All right, so the goals for the staff training, the training that we did with the staff was we wanted to do several things. The first and foremost, we wanted to have an overview of the challenge process at ACPL. So libraries all tend to do this a little bit differently. There's some commonalities there, but we wanted to make sure that our staff really knew what our process was and how that worked. And we wanted to teach people how to represent the organization and not personal views, and find a middle ground between validating patron concerns, not letting our own feelings influence the discussion, and standing up for everyone to read what they want and to be and see themselves reflected in our collection. And that's kind of a balance to walk through all of those there. And then learn some skills to facilitate and address patron challenges and process them appropriately afterwards.
So we started out each of our trainings with open discussion. We pose these questions. What is everyone's experience with patron challenges? What do they fear happening? How can we help them prepare? What do they need from us? And potentially what role-playing scenarios would be valuable? And so we typically, honestly, just tended to focus on what's been your experience. I think people ultimately, our staff, want to talk about this. They want to feel heard, and they just want to kind of share in their experiences. And we found various responses to this. Many of our staff are branch assistants and don't necessarily have the experience with it. But again, we know the importance of making sure all public facing staff know what to do, know how to handle it, because ultimately it's going to be your 12-hour-a-week shelver that is going to be questioned by somebody, and making sure that they're also prepared is really important. So we had this open discussion to start things with and get the ball rolling. And so obviously one of the big discussion points is, why are materials challenged? So we know historically there have been a variety of reasons, and but currently we're seeing a rise. We know that. You're all here. The fact that we have 66 attendees here shows that this is a concern amongst all of us. And so historically, we know that there have always been book challenges for a variety of reasons, and it could be coming from the left, coming from the right, middle. You can find fault with almost any material necessary, depending upon your political views. But typically, it's been hyperlocal. It's been focused on a particular library, a particular school, and not very widespread. Now, though, we are seeing much larger group challenges that are, we have groups that are coming together. They are targeting specific books at multiple systems, multiple libraries, both public, school, academic. And so we know that the topics that are tended to be focused on are LGBTQ plus, as well as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color stories. So, and it tends to be children's and teen materials, but we know that's not necessarily always the case. We have adult materials as well. And the reason for wanting to challenge them is usually language. They're classifying them as pornography. They're saying it's obscene, it's harmful to minors. These are very kind of vague terms, and they're also, legal terms too. And that's the thing, is that you could say something's harmful to minors, but what exactly does that mean? And that's the challenge. And that's what we're trying to help our staff with.
So let's pause just a second for any questions. Move on. So before I talk about the initial conversation here with the patron, that this is how we this is our process for training staff on how to have that initial conversation. I'll just kind of go over a brief overview of our challenge process here at ACPL. Libraries do it differently, so make sure you know your own process, of course. But here we want to keep it a conversation with our community as kind of the goal behind all of our policies and procedures around it. So we don't have the form on our website, the reconsideration form on our website. It's something that is, if a patron comes in, staff are encouraged to redirect them to a manager. And then the manager would then have a conversation with that patron about their concerns. And then if that conversation doesn't resolve the issue, the manager would be the one that hands out that form. That form then goes to our chief of public operations, who assembles a committee to look at that material and make a decision on that. So it has, for us, not routinely gone that far. We've had a lot of those initial conversations. We've had a lot of just comments at the desk. Of course, I'm sure you all have those stories as well, but thankfully it has not gone up to that. But we want to keep it a conversation, and we want to make sure that our community knows and understands that we're listening, that there is a process for them to express their opinions, and that we will take them seriously for that. And so that kind of underlies it all. We intentionally don't have the form on our website because we want to make sure, and our policy is written such that only members of the community can challenge a book in our collection, or any item or program or whatever it would be in our collection, and that's intentional. So I think something like, I forget the actual percentage, but the vast majority of all challenges in 2022 or 2023 were put in by 11 people, so nationwide. So it is a very small active group that are challenging these, but it is, they are very passionate about it. So, but I'm not sure it's as widespread.
Yeah. And you may see in the challenges that you do get that it's usually very clear when they're copying and pasting text from a larger organization. You know, maybe they haven't necessarily read the actual material, but they'll copy and paste the kind of nationwide or statewide verbiage for this. And it looks like we do have a question in the chat, Matt. It's, what about grounds of religious standpoints? That's something I've seen in my area. So I'm curious, from what perspective? So they're saying a book should not be in the system due to their religious views. Is that what you're thinking? While we wait for your response, I would say, you know, we say, or they say we have materials that go against all aspects of Christianity. Oh, what we typically address with staff is to say, you know, we have materials for everyone. Obviously, that's, the library is for everyone with all the varied viewpoints. I'm sure we do have something that fits your need. We have something that you'd be interested in, and we ultimately try to steer these conversations when possible into a reference transaction and explain, you know, okay, you don't like this material, but I bet we have something that you do like. You know we have Christian fiction. We know we have a good variety of materials in the 200s, the 290s. So we're going to have something for them. So try to steer it in that direction. And they might not be sold necessarily, but the library is here for everyone. And we have members of the community with various religious viewpoints.
For sure. All right, so this initial conversation, this is how we tell our staff. Okay, so patron is coming up to the desk. They may be very heated, very upset. Maybe their child stumbled across something and they're, you know, a little bit panicky about it, activated. So sometimes these conversations can be, you know, they start at a very high emotional level. So step one, breathe, you know, take a deep breath. You know, that slows the pace of the conversation down, and it also helps regulate yourself in this. So don't forget to breathe. Take a deep breath. Always remain calm and courteous. You know, sometimes maybe this doesn't need to be said, but it's worth saying that our goal here is to de-escalate this conversation. And matching them tone for tone is going to escalate, of course. And so, as with all patron interactions, remaining calm and courteous is key to this. Take the patron seriously. Okay, you don't have to agree with them. In fact, you might violently disagree with them, and in fact, you might feel personally attacked on that. All of that has happened to staff here, and that all is completely valid. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But you want to take that patron seriously. You want to make sure that you are not dismissive or, not taking them seriously, because this is a big deal for them. They really, really, really care about this. They may be wrong, but they do care very seriously about it, and we need to match that seriousness. And this is why we have the policies. This is why we have reconsideration policies, because we believe very strongly that patrons have the right to question the materials that we have. So.
Well, and there have been instances where a patron brings something forward, and ultimately, while we don't agree with removing the book, it could be that it's misclassified, right? We know the ages 8 to 12. That's a very difficult group to try to classify these books. It could go one department or the other. And so them bringing this up to us is really helpful for us in looking at the books. And that's also why it's important for staff to ultimately know their collection and know where things are as well, to try to preemptively look at these things. Sorry, ma'am.
Still my thunder. So thank them for bringing this to your attention. This is a key technique that I use all the time for all sorts of different interactions with patrons. Thank them for bringing this to your attention. That's not agreeing with them. That is, hey, yeah, I see this is really important to you. Thank you. We want to avoid sharing personal opinions, okay? And this is true if you agree with them, and this is true if you disagree with them, okay? You want to avoid sharing your own personal opinions with them, because what they're primarily looking for is validation, so that they can go off, and it doesn't matter whether you're a cert clerk or a shelver or the manager of the department. They're going to go off and tell all their friends, the librarian at so and so agrees with me about this. So you want to avoid sharing personal opinions. And Tonya has a great story about that.
So one of the aspects of taking the patron seriously, avoiding personal opinions, one interaction I had, this was years ago at a library in Virginia, where a patron came up to me with a concern over the number of James Patterson books we had in the collection. Specifically, they thought we had too many. And deep down inside, I thought, well, yes, agree. James Patterson, too many. But it was one of those that obviously I couldn't say, oh man, yeah, I agree. This guy, he's just rubber stamping all his books and we have too many. But instead I was like, we meet the demands of our community. We have this number of books, and I'm sure we have something else that you'd like, because they were dead set on all you have is James Patterson. And clearly that wasn't the case, but I took them seriously, explained that it was to meet the demands and the needs and the holds ratios of our patrons, and then tried to point them in the direction of something they would enjoy. But deep down inside, I was thinking, oh, yes, we have too many. But it's one of those that, again, you want to make sure that you're kind of maintaining professionalism and taking them seriously, because I thought at first that she was joking with me, but that was not the case.
And then lastly, we can empathize without agreeing. So empathy is not agreement. Empathy is, I see this is really important to you. I see this matters a lot. I see you're really, upset about this. Empathy is naming their emotions, naming what they're feeling, what you see in them, and then also stating back to them what they've said. So it's not agreeing. It doesn't mean you agree with them, but you are stating back. People want to be heard. Like, they want to be heard. They want to be taken seriously. And 9 times out of 10, that will be enough. You could stop right here. We don't have to go on. We don't have to go further. Patrons want to be heard. And so this stops a lot of that. And that's what we see here, is that this stops right here. And, sometimes they just need to vent. They're just going to vent about the display that they don't like. And then off they go, and nothing ever comes of it. So. And I will again pause just a second for questions. I'm going very quickly through
We'll have
this.
discussion at the end.
We're used to more discussion. So, okay, so on to the kind of the meat and potatoes of what of the talking points that we have. So this is kind of the three overarching the overarching like points that we want to get across to the patrons. Okay, there's lots of ways you can do this. There's lots of research you can look at and things you should be looking at. We'll have some resources here at the end for you as well to kind of learn through these. These are kind of the ones we decided as an organization that we want to push as the most important and the biggest way to build commonality in the community. First, what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't go and send people to the ALA website. I wouldn't hand them, you know, the Bill of Rights or the Librarian Code of Ethics or any of those. I would not hand. If they know what the ALA is at all, they don't like it and they don't care for it. So, they just don't. They're not going to agree with it. You know, Purple for Parents is called the ALA a Marxist organization, and so. It's just it's not a good way to build rapport. However, that said, the ALA has a lot of great, fantastic resources. You should definitely be using them to generate your own kind of talking points. We've also left these fairly vague. We don't give out, you know, canned messages for staff to repeat or parrot back. These are left vague. We want staff to go back. We tell them to go back and spend some time thinking through these and putting these in their own words so that they have that language and they have that words. Because, you know, when we talk about taking a patron seriously, if, you know, a patron comes up to the desk and is really emotional and complains and, you know, the staff member says, oh, wait, I got my little, you know, note card here of the thing I need to say to you. Like, that's not building rapport with your community. That is very much it would be seemingly dismissive. Staff want the security of that. They want the security of that, having that statement, but it's not in the best interest of them or the patrons to provide that. I really believe that they should be spending some time thinking through these things on their own. All right, so point number one, as a public library, we exist to provide information for all members of our community. If you've been in the public library world for any length of time, this is second nature for you, but this is not second nature for our public. They don't know this about us. They don't understand this. They don't get it. And so sometimes I've been able to stop right here, like, because even if they don't agree with me that we should have this book, they at least see that, like, well, it would be against the mission of the organization to get rid of it. So obviously this isn't going to go anywhere. So this is a really important thing. We exist to provide information for all members of our community, right? We're supported by the entire community. If you're in Indiana, anyway, it's the property tax of everybody in your area, or some sort of tax. There's some counties doing other things. And that means it's not a majority rule. We don't just serve the majority of what most people in our county believe. It's everybody, it's all members of our community. And so for as many parents as, you know, don't want a child reading a book with LGBTQ characters in it, there are parents that actively do want their child reading and finding those books with LGBTQ representation in them. So it is important that we have those materials for everybody to find them. So we want to defend the individual right to read and the right to information, not a specific item. There's kind of two parts to this. We want to defend the individual right to read. This is, I think, a point of commonality that we have with some of these groups. They are really into individual rights, and specifically their own. But it's important to get them out into the mindset of we agree with you. Like, you should have the right to read what you want. Everybody should have the right to read what they want, to see themselves in the collection, to see themselves reflected. We know how important that is for people. I remember a challenge that came in last year, 2 years ago now, I guess. And I was just, reading through the book, reading through Amazon reviews of the book. And I mean, Amazon reviews are what they are, but like so many different reviews of people saying, this book gave me, language that I didn't know. I was able to talk to my kid, or this book saved my life because I saw that there were people out there like me, So this is really important stuff. And we want to make sure that we're defending individuals' right to read. And that requires, of course, point number one, that we do have information for all members of our community. So, and then the third point, the library supports parents and guardian rights in selecting materials for their family. Again, this is, I think, a point of commonality with some of these groups that are targeting libraries and the material that we have. We want the parents have every right to decide what their child reads, and we want to give them that right. And what we need to get kind of change their mindset from, but we're all parents, right? For all those people that don't want their children finding that book, there are parents that do want their children finding that book. And so it's important that we do have it and that they are able to find it, and that we're not stepping on anybody's rights to find it or decide what materials their family can choose. It's important to kind of know in your system what tools you have for that, because parents will come back on that one and say, well, how do I know that? You won't tell me what my child has checked out, depending on your library system and how your policies are written. But you should know those. You should know your tools. We have an app where parents can link their kids' cards, so we don't have to do anything. We don't have to, it's completely hands off for us. But your system might have a way of linking accounts and things like that. So it's something to kind of think through as an organization of what tools are you giving parents to do this, because you don't want to say this and then not have any tools for parents. So it is something to be thinking through, while also, of course, remembering to protect privacy of every individual. So.
And I think it's just, while I am not a parent, I think it's important, and we wouldn't reiterate this necessarily to the individuals. I mean, these are conversations that they should be having ideally with their kids. And so it's not for us to protect their children necessarily in that regard. It's conversations that they should have some personal responsibility. And I see some comments in the chat that, yeah, the library will likely have something that offends everyone, whether it be James Patterson, for instance, or other James Patterson books. There is material that exists that is going to offend somebody, but ultimately that is a choice to read it or to not, to view it or to not. And one thing that I always find interesting in these challenges is that the internet exists. We know the internet exists, and there are far worse materials out there that are harmful to the individual than the written word or a graphic novel. And so I feel like to a certain extent they're targeting the wrong thing if they're going to target anything. But and then we have some comments here. Brianne tries to explain to a parent what concerns with a book to read it with a kid. That way everyone is on the same page and can bring questions up. Definitely agreed.
It's a great tactic. I am a parent, and I will say, like, it's not possible to keep track of what your kids are reading entirely. But it is important to have these conversations. I will also say that some of this is because parents do not want to be having these conversations with their children. Like, they intentionally do not want that. So like that, I mean, for librarians who are like information professionals, like, we're like, well, that's weird, but they don't. It brings up awkward questions. And, I've had heated parents who are the thing they're most upset about is now they have to have this conversation with their kid, that they didn't want to. So that's just a thing, right or wrong, that is a thing that exists. So for that. So yeah, the kids come to their library with a phone, but the books are the problem. That's the kind of ludicrousness of this whole thing, is to, it's in Indiana, with the law that was passed targeting school libraries. You had a state congressman up there, but holding up a list of these books with these terms are, I have a list, of these books that are terrible. And like, the internet exists. Like, like, I spend way more bandwidth as a parent trying to keep my kids safe from stuff on the internet, than any I would ever be concerned about with books. But that's, a thing, and that's also hard to get communicated. So,
All right.
oh,
Okay.
one.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Tonya, to
No, go
if
ahead.
I go back. The one thing I also want to mention about this specific thing with staff is this conversation is important for them to think through. Okay, they need to be thinking through this conversation. They need to expect it to happen. This is not a training like a fire drill, or this is a training more like a fire drill than a plat card, right? Somebody comes in for a plat card or out of county card. You could pull out that procedure, you can read through it, no problem, right? This is going to happen just as rarely, but it is more akin to a fire drill. You kind of have to know what you're going to do ahead of time. It's really important to be thinking through these and to be encouraging your staff to be thinking through these as well. For this kind of information, there was a coach, a basketball coach, who did a study, and he split his team into 3 groups. And one of the groups, he had practicing free throws constantly for a month. And then another group, he had not practicing, but just sitting and visualizing themselves making free throws. So just sit, think about, okay, I'm going to make free throws, and I'm going to make them every time. And then he had the third group do nothing. They had their normal training, nothing extra on that. And so at the end of that month, the 2 groups, the ones who had actually practiced free throws and the ones who had visualized themselves practicing free throws, both had the same level of improvement in their free throws, which is pretty crazy and mind-blowing. But just walking through this in your head is really, really, really important, that we're not caught off guard, or because these can be intense. These can be really intense. And so the tendency is that we're kind of like a deer in headlights thing like that. And we have seen, I think, in our staff after these trainings, some really good responses in them to staff, to patron interactions. So, all right, go ahead, Tonya.
Okay, so after the initial discussion or incident with a patron, what's next? What does the staff member need to do? And so, they want to process what happened. They might be shook. They might be just really upset. And so I think the most important thing is, of course, for them to talk to their manager or their supervisor, let them know what happened as soon as possible. And then, seek support from your team, from your colleagues, talk about it in a way that's confidential, obviously, because we never want things to get out, but, go in the back workroom, talk about what happened, express your concerns, what bothered you. Do not vent on social media, though. I think communication is good. It's good to have kind of solidarity and lean on each other, but we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is protecting confidentiality. So social media is definitely not a great place to do that, nor is our Teams chats or Zoom chats. And I think it's really important just to know that you're there for each other, but you have to be careful with how you're communicating with it. And we know, of course, that written records are FOIA requestable. And so anything that they put in email, in a team chat, it can be requested later. So again, that's why if you're going to communicate about this in a venting manner, it's best to do that off desk and just not in written form. And the important thing we also emphasize is self-care. So in many of these interactions, as Matt said, it could be something that staff disagree with. It might attack them to their core of who they are. And it's not going to just be, okay, I'm going to bounce back like a rubber band and I'm fine. No, we explained to staff that it's going to potentially affect you for hours, days, months, depending on what it is. And we know any interaction that's heated can be jarring. It can, you'll get shaky after, but especially if something that is attacking who you are, who your family is, who your friends are, or something that you just simply believe strongly in, it's important to know that staff will not bounce back immediately and they're going to need that additional support. And so after that, again, they're going to want to potentially connect the patron to a manager or supervisor. What we tell staff is we try to get them to your branch assistants, even your librarian ones. We try to connect the patron with the manager, because we feel that the manager is maybe better equipped to try to talk the patron off the ledge, so to speak. They're equipped with more authority, which sometimes helps. And so whenever possible, we try to get the staff to direct the patron to a manager when they're willing, because quite often they don't want to talk to a manager. They just want to voice their concerns. And then in our case, does there need to be an incident report? I'm sure many of you have incident report systems of some sort in place. And so we say, patrons can voice their concerns. We want to hear from them. They're our community, but it cannot get to the level in which they're violating our patron behavior policy. They cannot attack us as individuals. They cannot threaten us. They cannot violate our patron behavior policy. So if and when that becomes an issue, we always tell staff, document it as an incident report. That's really important. And then again, inform your manager and supervisor of the conversation. So here at ACPL, we have essentially two forms. We have our materials challenge form, and then we also have a reconsideration. What is it called, Matt?
Yeah, patron reconsideration.
Patron reconsideration. So we ask staff that every time you have a discussion with a patron, and it might not go to a formal challenge, which is ideal, but we do ask that they fill out a form that we have, which is a reconsideration request. And it is less formal, and it gives us an opportunity to reveal the material before it becomes an actual request to remove or relocate. And so that just gives us, Matt, myself, and the rest of administration, an opportunity to review a book, because it could be, again, something that was potentially misclassified. In our system, and we're working on this right now, but in our system, we have films that are in Japanese, and the call number starts with J, and then you have the rest of the call number. And I don't know about you, but we also have movies that start with J because they're juvenile. So quite often things might be either misclassified or they might be misshelved. A Japanese anime might be mistaken for a cartoon or a juvenile title, especially if it has that J in the call number. And so we're working to rectify that right now, but they might ultimately be correct in that it's misclassified. They might be correct in that it is misshelved. And so again, that's the importance of giving us a heads up when these conversations happen.
Yeah. There's Christina has a thing in the chat, but we had one major challenge in our facility who was screaming with profanity at the staff over serving pornography to children as the toddler story time was letting out. And when we tried to ask him not to use that language, double down. Yeah, so I had to redirect him to areas away from the public to have this conversation. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, we always, ideally this is kind of, the manager would take it aside into a study room or a quiet area to have this conversation. But yeah, that's really important that this not happen on the desk, if at all possible. Sometimes that's where it is. And moving them would be awkward. But yeah, the double standard there.
Well, and we also, at that point for us, if somebody's screaming profanity,
that's
obviously
true. That's an automatic.
That's a ban in our case, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be willing to leave necessarily. So that is a challenge. And one of the other things that, while we're talking about patrons that are actively coming up to the desk to challenge a book or just say why they're not happy with the book, we also see quiet resistance or quiet banning, so to speak, of people checking out all the books off of an LGBTQ display. We've seen that certainly in some of our branches, or hiding books we've seen as well. And so it's important for us as an administration to also know about that, because it's just, we want to have a pulse on what's going on in our community and what's going on in our branches. So we do also see the quiet quiet banning or quiet attempt to remove materials.
Yeah, there's a library in California that they had their entire Pride Month display was checked out, and the patron wrote the library and said, "I've checked all these out and I'm not returning them until you promise not to have any more displays like this." And so they did and the library said, "Well, thanks for the circulations. We're gonna replace, those books." And so they had donations just like poured in, way more than the cost of the books. Like donations to the library poured in to support them in that. So there is a strong segment of the community that knows what we're about and is on board with that. And so in terms of, like Tonya mentioned, like knowing the sorts of things that go on in your collection, know your collection. Nothing substitutes knowing your collection. Know what the books are, know what books are being challenged. Those lists are very easy to find. I spend an inordinate amount of time reading those books. But know what this happens, so that when something comes at you, you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that book is about. I know what that's talking about. I know the controversy about that, because that ahead of time preparation, that's not obviously something all your staff can do, but it's important to do as much as you can to prepare yourself ahead of time for this kind of thing. So
and yeah, and when new books come in, know what's coming in. And in some of your systems, you might be doing the ordering directly. Here at ACPL, we have centralized ordering. That would be all the people that report to Matt. And so when those new books come in, it's important to, to look at them and see, okay, where is this going? What is this and where is it going? Just to know, because it's not an exact science when things are being classified and cataloged. As much as we do have the science, it's sometimes it's a little bit of, I don't want to say guesswork, but it's making a judgment call. And so it's important for you to raise those concerns with, if you have a collection team or whoever is cataloging, if you have concerns or want to raise some questions.
Yep. Encourage your staff to raise issues ahead of time. I've actually had more in the last 2 years. I've had more staff actually come to me with a book and say, "Hey, the patron mentioned this book, but they didn't want to do anything about it, or it didn't need to go any further. But now that I look at it, I'm kind of agree. Like, should we look at this book?" And so maybe also having an internal process for that can be a little bit looser, probably, but staff should be able to bring this stuff up as well. I found a lot of them, and most of them, yeah, I've moved sections from children to teen to adult, because like a lot of this stuff is on the edge and it's in the gray, and it is not an exact science, and we don't want to give the impression to our patrons that it is an exact science. And so there's a lot of, and then that we know the range within the 11 to 13 age range. Like there's a lot of different reading levels within that, and what they're ready for and not ready for, and that sort of thing. And so it's important to remember that. But in general, we keep the stuff available. We never removed a book, of course. So I want to, if I could step back just to self-care for just a second. I want to emphasize this even more for you guys. Like, this is something that we, especially for those of you who are managers, directors, we need to be really thinking about our staff in this, because these conversations are hard. Any negative interactions with the patron is hard, and they need to be given the support to deal with that afterwards. And that's going to look different for every individual. It's whether that's, hey, yeah, go 15 minutes off desk, to get that initial adrenaline kind of removed from the system and flushed out, or it's going to be a longer talk. Hey, do you need to debrief? You need to talk about that, that sort of thing. Prayer, meditation, exercise. My 9-year-old runs upstairs and screams his head off into a pillow. So, whatever self-care looks like for you guys and for your staff. And if you need ideas or suggestions, please do reach out. We have a pretty robust HR department that does have a lot of options and has put in place a lot of stuff for us. So that's good. So I think we're ready for next steps. So Paula has a link there to
Oh.
helpful for libraries. Yeah. That's a good one. Okay, so next steps. What do you guys do with this information is up to you. But I would recommend you review the resources that we'll give you on the next page. Stay current on this issue. It's not going away anywhere anytime fast. I think slowed down a little bit, but we're still seeing reports of libraries having to getting challenged. Libraries in Indiana have had some pretty horrific stories and things happen to them, and so but across the US this is happening. The law in Indiana right now only targets school libraries, but it could penalize teachers or school librarians for having materials harmful to minors, whatever that means. It's being challenged because that language is so vague as to be meaningless. But that doesn't mean it is the law right now. And there are laws that are targeting public libraries in other states. Alabama, Tennessee, I think, have laws that specifically targeting public libraries and what they can and cannot do. And it's influencing our ability to serve the community and even serve our school districts. There's school districts that are, some library systems in Indiana have automatic cards for kindergartners and things like that, or access to the Overdrive, Libby, Hoopla, things like that for students. Schools are starting to cut those ties because of this kind of thing. And so it's, and this could also have a chilling effect on the individual. Like, I have this conversation with my selectors, like, well, I could buy that book. It's kind of on the edge. It's going to cause a controversy. Maybe I just wait to see, so we want to, that's a thing. Like, the self-censoring is really important. There's school librarians that are going through and censoring their collection ahead of time for this kind of thing. So those are all kind of concerns and things. So please stay current on this issue and have ongoing trainings have trainings for your staff. However big or small your staff is, please, those trainings look like have them. If you don't have the ability to do it in-house, please reach out to me and Tonya, and we can see what we can do for you guys. But because like I said, we've done this a couple times now. So, but have the trainings, talk to your staff about this issue, make sure it's current in their thing. Role play, we haven't done it yet, but like for this issue, but like it's important, like just that physical act of walking through a challenge or what could happen is really important. There's nothing better that prepares you for it. And like, I'm an introvert, like most librarians, right? Like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to look silly. I don't want to look stupid. And so, but we tell our staff, like, you're going to do this with your teams. We're all going to do it. We're all going to look silly together. Like, you just kind of got to buy into it in the moment. And it's okay. But I would use, for the role plays, like, use the real books, use the real stuff that's been challenged. Don't do the silly, Winnie the Pooh because he doesn't have pants, although that's hilarious. But do the real books, the real things that are being challenged, because that also simultaneously educates your staff on kind of the things that are being challenged, the materials that are being challenged. So,
and I will say, and I say this every time, this is my favorite slide, just because Matt does this slide and I just look at the faces of staff and I could tell the instance when they read the words role playing, and I could see I don't want to say panic, but almost the panic, the nervousness in their eyes. And I think Matt's right. It's lean into the awkward, lean into it. We're all in it together. It's going to be tough, but really nothing can beat an example of somebody showing you this graphic novel and saying, you can't agree with this photo. This is violent. This is, pornography. This is X, Y, and Z. And there's nothing better than trying to be caught off guard in these scenarios and preparing for future interactions.
So on the next slide is our list of resources we've built. I've seen some in the chat. I need to compare, make sure I have all those in there. I have some of them in there. So, okay. Tony, can you
yeah.
Move to the next?
Yep. Sorry.
Okay. Nope, you're good. Okay. So that's there. please, as some of you have done, please do share your own resources. I would constantly build out this list if I could. This is all really good. There's all really good information in these sites. And the last thing kind of to touch on before we open up questions in the end here is the staff response to this. Staff have been very, very, very grateful that we've put the time and the energy into this. This is a commitment, like this is a time commitment, just with all our locations and everything like that, cultivating the training and stuff. So hopefully we've helped remove some of that lift for you guys today as you contemplate putting trainings for your own staff. But it's been like everybody's been really grateful that we've done this. And like I said before, we've seen definitely in the interactions that staff do have with patrons, the quality has gone up. It's been better, and we've seen some positivity with that in the way that they've dealt with that, and so it's been really good for that. So I think, and nothing can beat like staff knowing that we have their back, especially as administration, as directors. Like the staff need to know that we have their back in these, that we will stand behind them, that we're not kind of throwing them to the wolves to like deal with these questions and these interactions on their own. So it's been really good, really positive feedback from these. So I'm sure that will change after we do the role play. So. All right, we'll open it up to questions from you guys. Have about 10 minutes here. Do you have any questions? Role-playing scenarios. Yeah, we have not developed yet role-playing scenarios, although I have several in mind. But yes, that would be the next thing to do. So.
We encourage you, though, reach out to Matt or myself or both of us if you have follow-up questions, resources that you'd like to share, information that we can help you with. While we're not experts, we've done this a few times and are happy to help.
Is the next slide our info, I think, Tonya?
Yes, it is.
Handy. Yeah. Yeah, we're here to help. If you need just someone to talk to, like just to talk you through, like, oh man, I just had this happen and I just need to talk through it with someone, please reach out. I've been doing this for a bit of time, as has Tonya, and so we're just happy to help however we can support you guys. So.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matthew and Tonya, and thanks for everyone being here today. And as a reminder, if you are watching an archived recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. So at this point, I guess we'll keep going on. We'll probably end it at about a little before 11. So it looks like we've got another question in there.
Yep, I see Christina as, what do you feel about asking a coworker to join you with a conversation with the patron as support? Does it lean towards ganging up on the patron? I think, so, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
So Ryan Dowd, for those of you guys who know him, he does homelessness training for libraries. He has a really good answer to this one. So, and how we support each other as staff. So ideally we would see one of our team members being, harangued or whatever it is, and then you would go towards that patron. You stand 7 to 10 feet away. So you're there. You're with an eye line of both the patron and so that both the patron and your teammate can see you. So you're there. You're supporting, but you're not the dominant role in the conversation. And that would be true if two of you are going towards a patron as well. One of you takes the lead in that. And then the other one kind of holds back 7 to 10 minutes. They're there to like grab anything that needs to be grabbed, call the police if that needs to happen. And they're also just a physical presence there. But you aren't seen as ganging up on the patron as well. So that's been, I feel, the best advice to that I've ever had. Tonya, if you want to add.
Yeah, no, I think agreed. I always just standing by your colleagues, like you said, 7 to 10 feet. I didn't think of the specific number, but that's important just in any scenario, provide that support. And then if it's an actual meeting, that between the manager and the patron. If they're not agitated or volatile, I think it's, fair for the manager and the patron to meet one-on-one, because I think in that scenario, they could see it as being ganged up upon. But on the actual desk, I think, yeah, provide that support, stay close by.
There's a lot of good trainings out there that are very similar to, not necessarily about challenges, but just any sort of negative interactions. Ryan Dodd's the best, in my opinion. Because he gets public libraries. There's a lot of good trainings on any of that sort of how to de-escalate conversations and things like that. So definitely look for those.
All right. So at this point, looks like people don't have a lot of questions. I think definitely this is something we are all dealing with, and it is not a fun thing to do. Like you said, go through this. So great. Yeah. Thank you very much again, everybody.